Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can y'all please come? We have a membership. Oh, shut the fuck up! Damn it, Bart.
A new audio recording just dropped in the Nolan Wells case, and it captures pure chaos on the water. The same afternoon the 18-year-old vanished from Horn Island. For the first time, we're hearing the frantic distress call made from the boat that left without him. At the same time, the United Cajun Navy is publicly firing back at attorney Ben Crump over a major claim about how Nolan's body was found. And prosecutors have made a quiet but very telling decision. They're keeping a key piece of evidence completely under wraps for now, and that choice says a lot about where this investigation is actually headed. In this video, I'm breaking down every new development, starting with the audio that has people replaying the same few seconds over and over. That part of the story, most of you already know by heart. What's new, what's pulling this case back into headlines nearly a month later, is a recording nobody outside investigators had heard until this week. The call nobody knew existed while Nolan was still on that island. Something else was happening out on the water. The boat that had carried part of his friend group was heading back toward the mainland when it started taking on water. The vessel's bilge pump, the system that's supposed to clear water out of the hull, had failed. Whoever was behind the wheel picked up the phone and called a private towing company called Sea Tow. The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources held onto that call for weeks. It only became public in the last few days, when Wellsox obtained it directly from MDMR, and outlets including NBC News and Newsweek followed with their own reporting on the same recording. Here's what's on it. The call was placed around 4 o'clock in the afternoon on July 4th. Investigators believe that's roughly the same window in which Nolan was last with, or near, the rest of his group on the island. A teenager aboard the boat gets through to the Sea Tow dispatcher, and the first thing you hear is urgency. He tells the dispatcher the boat is near the western tip of Horn Island, that the bilge pump has stopped working, and that they're sinking. He asks for someone to come get them. The dispatcher, doing her job, starts asking the standard questions. How bad is it? Is everyone safe? The caller answers that yes, everyone on board is fine. No children. Nobody over 21. When she asks how many people are actually on the boat, the caller answers, about 7, a number that seems to catch her off guard, given how the call started. When it comes to the practical details, the call turns almost comically strained for a moment. The dispatcher asks for membership information so she can process the tow, and the teenager struggles to answer. It takes a while before he's able to give her the boat's GPS coordinates, so a tow crew could even find them. At one point he asks, in so many words, whether someone can come, unpump the boat, and tow it back in. Not exactly technical language, but understandable panic from a group of teenagers watching water rise around their feet. In the background, before the dispatcher even picks up, there's commotion. Hold music playing over what sounds like several people talking at once. That's the part of the recording that's since taken on a life of its own. What the enhanced audio picked up. A rougher version of this call circulated first. Then an enhanced, cleaned-up version surfaced just this week, and that's the version people can't stop replaying. With the background noise stripped down, listeners say they can make out fragments that weren't audible before. A voice that sounds like it says, "Is he dead?" Another voice that seems to say, "Nolan." Someone reacting with what sounds like shock. A voice telling someone to check his chest. Another telling someone to wake up. At another point, the caller can be heard sharply telling someone in the background to quiet down. Now, before anyone runs too far with this, and a lot of people already have, every single one of those interpretations is exactly that, an interpretation. None of it has been confirmed by investigators, by the sheriff's department, or by anyone with the technical equipment to definitively clean and verify the audio beyond what amateur online sleuths are doing with headphones and slowed down playback. Authorities have been clear on one specific point. They maintain that Nolan Wells was not physically on this boat when the call was made. If that's accurate, then whatever those muffled voices are saying, they're not describing Nolan in that exact moment, on that exact boat. Which means the "is he dead" theory, if it turns out to be real at all, would need a very different explanation than the one social media has already decided on. What we do know for certain is what happens next on the recorded call. The dispatcher tries to connect the caller with the sea tow captain directly. The captain, in turn, says he's already been in touch with the boat operator's grandfather, a man named Jerry Adkerson, who, notably, is the same person who would later hand investigators permission to search that boat and pull its GPS data as part of the death investigation. According to the captain, Adkerson said the situation was under control, so despite everything you just heard on the call, Sea Tow says help was ultimately waved off. The boat owner called back to say assistance was no longer needed because help had already been found elsewhere. That's where Sea Tow's involvement in this story ends. So what actually happened to that boat afterward isn't fully clear from the call alone. What is clear is the timing. This emergency was unfolding on the water at almost exactly the window investigators believe Nolan was last with, or near, the rest of his group on the island. A boat scrambling to stay afloat, panicked teenagers, a dispatcher trying to get a straight answer out of them, and somewhere behind them on the sand, Nolan Wells, about to become the center of a national story. The video that came before the call. To understand why this new audio landed so hard, you have to go back to the piece of evidence that was already circulating before it. A video, filmed from a boat near the shoreline, that shows a heated exchange among a group of young people on the island. It's widely believed to have captured the last moments Nolan was seen or heard before he vanished. Attorney Ben Crump, representing the Wells family, played up this video at an early press conference, saying that Nolan's voice could be heard in it, demanding, "Give me my freaking phone. What are you doing?" That claim spread fast, in part because of how it read. A teenager on a remote island, surrounded largely by strangers, seemingly fighting to get his phone back just hours before he disappeared without one. But one of Nolan's own longtime friends pushed back hard on that interpretation. Tresistin Shepard told multiple outlets, including ABC News and Rolling Stone, that the yelling voice in the clip is his, not Nolan's, and that the confrontation had nothing to do with Nolan at all. It was between Shepard and a stranger who, he says, started a fight with him. Shepard said the group, including Nolan, had been on the island since late morning, drinking, socializing with a crowd that ballooned to roughly 300 people that afternoon. He's also said publicly that he and his friends have faced serious online harassment since Nolan's death, and that all of them cared about Nolan and are still grieving him. That single video, in other words, has become a kind of Rorschach test for this entire case. Depending on who's narrating it, it's either evidence that something happened to Nolan involving his phone shortly before he disappeared, or it's a completely unrelated squabble between two other people that got swept up into the timeline because it happened to be filmed nearby, around the same time. The girl, and two very different accounts of the same conversation. There's a second thread running underneath all of this, and it's the explanation Nolan's friends have given for why he wasn't on the boat in the first place. According to Shepard and other friends who spoke to investigators, Nolan met a young woman on the island that day, later identified in some reporting as 19-year-old Katie McCormack, and the two hit it off enough that Nolan chose to stay behind rather than leave with the group. Warren Hudson, another friend who wasn't on the sinking boat, but says he spoke with people who were, has said much the same thing on a podcast appearance, that the group was dealing with a genuine emergency on the water, that nobody simply abandoned Nolan, and that he chose on his own to remain on the island with the girl he'd met. Here's the part that complicates that account. According to reporting on the same investigative file, when the young woman herself was interviewed, she reportedly told investigators something different, that Nolan had actually told her he was heading back to the mainland with his friends, not staying behind with her. That's a direct contradiction, sitting right at the center of the timeline, and as of now, nobody in the reporting has resolved it. Nolan's parents have publicly rejected the "he stayed for a girl" explanation entirely. His father, Elmore Wansley, has said plainly that the family raised Nolan to stick with the group he came with. "If you leave with 5 people," he said, "you come home with 5 people." His mother has separately said it seemed improbable that her son would have voluntarily stayed behind on a remote island, miles from shore, without his phone. Investigators, for their part, have said their early interviews support the idea that Nolan chose to remain on the island, and that his friends believed at the time he'd catch a ride back with someone else in the crowd. Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter has said that's the working theory his department has been building from witness statements. But he's also acknowledged that the investigation is ongoing, and that getting accurate information, in his words, takes real time, even while the public wants answers immediately. A judge, a timeline, and a family trying to set the record straight. One of the more precise timelines to come out of this whole case didn't come from investigators at all. It came from a Mississippi Chancery judge named Ashley Cole, whose son Warren was on the boat with Nolan that day. Cole posted publicly, saying she wanted to dispel some rumors with facts, after weeks of speculation about her family's role in the case. According to her account, Warren was interviewed by the Jackson County Sheriff's Department and cooperated fully. He told investigators he last saw Nolan around 3 in the afternoon on July 4th. The group left the island around 4:30, she said, after the boat began taking on water because of the bilge pump problem, and Nolan, in her account, made the decision at that point to stay behind and return later with a different group of friends. Cole also addressed why she'd briefly deactivated her own Facebook account, saying it was about protecting her children's safety amid what she described as an intensely heated online environment, not about avoiding scrutiny of the investigation. She noted that neither she nor her husband was on Horn Island that day, and said none of her family was trying to obstruct the investigation in any way. It's worth being clear about how this fits into the broader case. Cole's post is one family's account of one part of the timeline, not an official investigative finding, but it does line up in broad strokes with what Shepard and Hudson have separately told other outlets: a boat, a bilge pump problem, a 4:30 departure, and Nolan choosing to stay. Where it doesn't line up cleanly is with the account attributed to the young woman Nolan reportedly stayed behind for, and with his parents' skepticism that he'd have made that choice at all. The phone that came back without him. If there's one detail that's fueled as much public suspicion as the audio itself, it's what happened to Nolan's phone. According to multiple reports, it's common practice among this friend group to leave phones on the boat during trips to Horn Island, to keep them safe from the water. Nolan's phone, by that account, simply stayed with the group when he stayed on the island, meaning it left Horn Island without him, and was later returned to his family. That single fact, a missing teenager's phone showing up back on the mainland, in the hands of the friends who came home without him, is exactly the kind of detail that online true crime communities can't leave alone, and it's easy to see why. Christine Wansley has said publicly that once she got her son's phone back, she became concerned about what she described as a lack of saved Snapchat messages on it, raising the question of whether anything had been deleted before it reached her. Ben Crump has leaned into this point hard, telling reporters that any digital footprint on a phone is essentially tamper-proof from a forensic standpoint, meaning that even deleted messages typically leave a recoverable trail. His legal team has said it's coordinating an independent examination of the phone, running in parallel with a separate forensic review being conducted by law enforcement, with assistance from the FBI. As of the most recent reporting, no findings from either phone review have been made public, and no evidence of tampering has been confirmed. 2 days on the water. Whatever happened after that boat pulled away, Nolan Wells did not make it back to the mainland with anyone that night. When his mother reported him missing, the search that followed was fast and large. Multiple agencies converged on Horn Island and the water around it: the Coast Guard, Marine Resources, National Seashore Rangers, sheriff's deputies, and the volunteer Cajun Navy, which flew drones and ran boats through the area for 2 straight days. It ended on the morning of July 6th, when a National Park Service ranger spotted a body in the water near the island's northwestern tip. the same general stretch of coastline where the group had spent their holiday. Accounts of exactly how Nolan was found have varied slightly, even among the searchers themselves. One Cajun Navy official initially described him as fully clothed, while another told a different outlet he was wearing only swim trunks, matching photos from earlier that day. Dental records ultimately confirmed the identity. United Cajun Navy Vice President Brian Trasher, who assisted in the search, has since drawn attention to the water conditions in that exact stretch of the Gulf. The channel between Horn Island and neighboring Ship Island is known locally, he says, as the washing machine, a nickname that predates Nolan's death by years and reflects a documented history of drownings in that specific area, caused by strong, converging rip currents. Trasher said the currents on July 4th were unusually strong, and that the seafloor near the island's northwest tip can shift from shallow to dangerously deep within just a few steps. Nolan, by all accounts, was a capable swimmer who swam regularly, but Trasher has noted that even a strong swimmer can be overwhelmed by that kind of current, particularly if fatigue, sun exposure, or alcohol are factors. At the same time, Trasher has been just as vocal about what the currents can't explain. He's called the stretch of time between roughly 4 or 4:30 in the afternoon, when Nolan was last accounted for, and the moment his body was found, a gaping hole in the case, a window with no photos, no video, and no confirmed eyewitness accounts of Nolan at all. That gap is, in many ways, the entire mystery in miniature. The fight over the body. If you've been following this story, you already know that what happened after Nolan's body was recovered has become almost as contested as what happened before it. The Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office performed an official autopsy. As of the most recent reporting, its full findings, including toxicology, have still not been released to the public. Officials have said that information will be held until it can be presented to a grand jury. Sheriff Ledbetter has said, "There's currently no indication that drugs or alcohol played a role," though that statement sits somewhat awkwardly next to Shepard's own account that the group had been drinking since late morning. A reminder that different pieces of this case, even the ones that sound settled, don't always line up cleanly yet. Frustrated by the pace and secrecy of the official process, Nolan's family, through attorney Ben Crump, arranged for a second, privately funded autopsy. Former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick paid for it. The exam was conducted on July 10th by Dr. Roger Mitchell, a board-certified forensic pathologist, past president of the National Medical Association, and the former chief medical examiner for the District of Columbia. Nearly 2 weeks later, at a news conference held during the Knox National Convention in Chicago, Crump stood in front of a packed room and announced the results. And the results, in plain terms, were inconclusive. Mitchell's report found no skull fractures, no lacerations, no obvious deep tissue trauma. It did note a red discoloration in the soft tissue at the back of Nolan's head, something Crump said required further investigation, but which, on its own, didn't point clearly toward foul play or rule it out. More strikingly, the report noted that certain internal neck structures, including his trachea, were missing from the body by the time Mitchell examined it, something Crump said left real gaps in what could be determined. Because of that, Crump read directly from the report's conclusion. The pathologist could not rule out whether non-accidental factors contributed to or caused Nolan's death. Crump was careful, even in that moment, to say this wasn't proof of anything sinister, just proof that there still isn't a clear answer. "We have more questions than answers at this time," he told the room. Nolan's mother, Christine Wansley, spoke as well, visibly frustrated with how the investigation had been handled, saying she believed local authorities had leaned toward calling her son's death accidental before the work was even done. It's worth being straightforward about something here. Forensic experts not involved in this case have pointed out that second autopsies conducted weeks after an initial exam almost always come back with limitations, simply because the body has already been through one full procedure. That doesn't make Mitchell's findings meaningless, but it is the context that's easy to lose in a headline that just says, "Cause of death, undetermined." One outside forensic pathologist, asked to comment generally on this kind of situation, noted that a secondary examiner rarely gets full access to the first examiner's own findings, largely because of legal and procedural restrictions around ongoing investigations, meaning gaps like the missing neck structures aren't necessarily evidence of anything hidden, so much as a byproduct of how two autopsies performed weeks apart normally work. Crump has also said he's pressing the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office to share its own photographs and observations directly with Mitchell, so the two findings can eventually be compared side by side instead of argued about from a distance. Whether that happens, and when, is still an open question. Where the national attention comes from. It's fair to ask why a single drowning case out of a small Mississippi county has pulled in Ben Crump, Colin Kaepernick, Al Sharpton, Terrell Owens, Spike Lee, Tyler Perry, and the NACT's National Board, which formally adopted a resolution calling for a deeper, more transparent investigation into Nolan's death. Part of the answer is straightforward grief and advocacy for a specific family that says it isn't getting straight answers. Part of it is bigger than this one case. Reverend Al Sharpton has directly invoked Mississippi's history, the murder of Emmett Till, the assassination of Medgar Evers, as the backdrop against which many people are watching this story unfold, arguing that law enforcement shouldn't be quick to rule out foul play before an investigation is even complete. Sharpton, Owens, and Kaepernick have also helped put up a combined reward, reported at $125,000, for information leading to an arrest and conviction connected to Nolan's death, though it's important to be clear that, as of now, nobody has been arrested or charged, and no official body has classified this as a homicide. At the same time, others have pushed back hard on that entire framing, arguing that independent autopsy is a misleading label for a privately commissioned second opinion, and questioning whether the attention around this case is proportionate to what the evidence has actually shown so far. That disagreement over language, over intent, over what counts as suspicious versus simply unresolved, has become its own part of the story, playing out across cable news, national newspapers, and social media at the same time. The official track, FBI, a grand jury, and dozens of interviews. Underneath all the press conferences, there's a quieter, more procedural track. This case has been on for weeks. The FBI's Jackson Field Office confirmed it has been assisting the Jackson County Sheriff's Department, specifically with the forensic examination of digital evidence gathered during the investigation, which would include, at minimum, a review of the same phone records the Wells family has raised questions about. Separately, the FBI has also opened its own effort to look into interstate threats that were reportedly made against people connected to the case, on more than one side of the story, both individuals who've publicly defended Nolan's friends, and, in earlier statements, families who said they feared for their own children's safety amid the intense online attention. Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath has said her office is treating the case as a priority and is offering direct support to law enforcement as the investigation continues. She's been consistent on one procedural point. Once the death investigation is complete, its full findings, not a summary, not a press release, but everything gathered, will go before a grand jury, which she's described as standard practice in Mississippi for any death that isn't ruled natural. That grand jury process is also why the state's official autopsy and toxicology results haven't been made public yet. Officials have said that information is being held so it can be presented intact, rather than picked apart in the media first. As for the scope of the investigation itself, Sheriff Ledbetter has said his department has interviewed approximately 60 witnesses so far, including detailed interviews with the three friends who were most closely tied to Nolan's movements on the boat that day. Investigators have also specifically asked the public for original, unedited photos and video taken on July 4th around the northwestern tip of Horn Island, the same stretch of shoreline where Nolan's body eventually surfaced, particularly anything showing altercations or showing Nolan himself. None of that work has produced, publicly, a single definitive answer yet. What it has produced is a slowly filling timeline, a boy last seen around 3 in the afternoon, an altercation on video that may or may not involve him, a young woman he'd just met who gives a different account than his friends do, a boat sinking around 4:30 a short distance offshore, a disconnected emergency call, a missing person report that night, and a body recovered from a stretch of water known for pulling swimmers under, 2 days after that. It's also worth sitting with how many people were actually present that day, because the crowd size is part of why this case has been so difficult to pin down. With roughly 300 people scattered across that stretch of sand, dozens of boats coming and going throughout the afternoon, and a holiday atmosphere that had people drifting between different groups all day, there was never one single vantage point that captured everything. That's part of why the sheriff's office keeps putting out public appeals for footage instead of announcing a finished timeline. The raw material to build one properly may still be sitting unposted on strangers' phones, which is exactly why the 60-some interviews conducted so far still leave real gaps, particularly in that stretch after 4:30, when nobody has produced a single confirmed photo, video, or eyewitness account of Nolan at all. That gap also explains why so many amateur theories have taken hold online. In the absence of one authoritative account, people have filled the empty spaces with their own reconstructions, some grounded in solid reporting, some built on nothing sturdier than a slowed-down audio clip and a strong hunch. That's not unique to this case, but it has shaped how the story spreads. Every new piece of evidence, including this emergency call, gets picked apart in real time by people with no access to the underlying investigation, which means theories can travel faster than confirmed facts ever do. And, as both the FBI's threat investigation and Judge Cole's own statement make clear, that speed has had real consequences for real families on more than one side of this case. Nolan Wells was laid to rest in his hometown of Ocean Springs, in a funeral whose expenses were covered by filmmaker Tyler Perry. His coaches, from high school through community college, have spoken about him in strikingly similar terms: humble, respected, a young man who led by example rather than noise, the kind of teammate every program hopes to have. His mother has said in her own words that she keeps waiting for him to walk through the door with his smile and a joke, the way he always would. That's the part of this story that's easy to lose underneath the audio waveforms and the press conferences and the arguments online. Whatever finally gets determined, accidental drowning, something else entirely, or a version of events nobody has proposed yet, a family is living without their son, and a young man who by every account was well-liked and hard-working is gone at 18. As of now, the sheriff's department has not classified this as a homicide, and no charges have been filed against anyone. The official autopsy and toxicology results have not been released. The independent findings remain undetermined. And this new emergency call, chilling as it sounds, hasn't closed a single one of the open questions in this case. It's only made clearer just how much was happening on the water and on that island in the same narrow window of time. And that's really the honest summary of where this stands nearly a month later. Every new release, the video, the first press conference, the independent autopsy, the judge's timeline, the phone questions, and now this emergency call has added texture to the day Nolan disappeared without actually resolving the central mystery. Each piece narrows the window a little further, places a few more people in a few more specific locations at a few more specific times, and still leaves the most important stretch of that afternoon undocumented. That's the frustrating rhythm of a case built almost entirely on second-hand accounts, partial video, and a small number of official records that haven't yet been made public. If there's real news in this recording, it isn't a confession hidden in the background noise. It's confirmation that the hour after Nolan Wells was last seen was far more chaotic, on that boat at least, than anyone outside that small group of friends previously knew. Whether that chaos connects to what happened to Nolan is still, honestly, the same question his family has been asking since the night he didn't come home. We'll keep following this case as new information comes out, because it deserves that kind of attention, careful, fact-checked, and fair to everyone involved until the actual investigation reaches its conclusion. If you want to stay updated as this story develops, please subscribe to this channel. This video is based on publicly available news reporting, official statements, and court and investigative records as reported by credible news organizations at the time of publication. It is intended for informational and commentary purposes only. No individual named or referenced in this video has been charged with a crime in connection with Nolan Wells' death, and all individuals are presumed innocent unless and until proven otherwise by a court of law. Some details in this case remain disputed, unconfirmed, or under active investigation, and this video does not claim to present a final or definitive account of what happened. Viewers are encouraged to consult original news sources for the most current information as this story continues to develop.